My name is Clark, and up until 2 weeks ago, I thought my life was fine. Not perfect, not extraordinary, but stable in the way you expect after 7 years of marriage. My wife, Margot, and I had built a quiet, comfortable existence together. We had the house with the big oak tree in the yard, Friday night takeout rituals, and the occasional weekend trip to her parents' cabin. It wasn't some grand fairy tale, but it was ours, and I thought it was enough. That all changed when I got the invitation. It arrived on a Tuesday, tucked between a pile of junk mail and a bill for the water heater repair. A plain black envelope with gold lettering. My first instinct was that it was some kind of upscale wedding invite. Margot's college friends were always hosting fancy, borderline ridiculous events, but when I opened it, the words inside made my stomach tighten. You're invited to a night of secrets, laughter, and unexpected revelations. A private party hosted by someone who knows you better than you think. There was no sender name, no address, just a date, time, and instructions to check my email for the location closer to the event. At first, I thought it might be a prank. I showed it to Margot when she came home that evening, expecting her to laugh and roll her eyes. But her reaction was strange. She froze. Her hands were still clutching the grocery bag, and for a moment, her face flickered with something. Was it fear? Guilt? Whatever it was, she quickly masked it with a forced laugh and said, "Probably some spam thing. You should toss it." Spam? In the mail? I raised an eyebrow. Besides, it's handwritten. That's pretty elaborate for a prank. Margot shrugged and turned away, her voice casual but her movements stiff. Well, whatever it is, it sounds weird. You're not actually thinking of going, are you? I didn't answer right away. To be honest, I wasn't sure. There was something about the phrasing, someone who knows you better than you think, that unsettled me. I spent the next few days turning it over in my mind, trying to decide whether to ignore it or follow the breadcrumbs. I even asked a few coworkers if they'd ever heard of anything like this, but they just joked that it sounded like a reality show stunt. Margot avoided the subject entirely. But then, 2 days before the date on the invitation, I got an email. The sender was anonymous, and the message was short. "We hope you'll join us for an unforgettable evening. The truth deserves to be seen. Address, 74 East Haven Road. Time, 8 p.m. I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. The truth? What truth? And why did this feel so personal? I decided I couldn't ignore it. The night of the party arrived. Margot claimed she had a work dinner and left the house around 6, wearing a sleek black dress I didn't recognize. She kissed me on the cheek, but there was an edge to her movements, like she was in a hurry to leave. As soon as she was gone, I grabbed my car keys and the email printout, heading to East Haven Road. The address led me to an unfamiliar neighborhood on the outskirts of town. The house was a modern mansion, its tall windows glowing with warm, golden light. Cars lined the driveway, sleek and expensive. My 10-year-old Honda looked wildly out of place as I parked near the curb. I hesitated at the door, second-guessing everything. Was this a mistake? Should I have told someone where I was going? Before I could turn back, the door opened, and a man I didn't recognize greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Clark, right? Welcome. We've been expecting you." The way he said my name sent a chill down my spine. The inside of the house was even more extravagant than I imagined. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling, the floors gleamed like they'd never been walked on, and a soft hum of conversation filled the air. People in elegant clothing mingled with glasses of champagne, but there was something off about the atmosphere, like an undercurrent of tension just below the surface. "Help yourself to a drink," the man said, gesturing toward a bar in the corner. "The host will make their announcement soon." "The host?" I asked. "Who's the host?" His smile widened. "You'll see." Before I could press further, he melted into the crowd, leaving me alone. I scanned the room, searching for a familiar face, but none appeared. It wasn't until I turned toward the far side of the room that my breath caught in my throat. There she was, Margot. She was standing near a group of people, her back to me, laughing at something someone had said. She wasn't supposed to be here. She'd said she had a work dinner. So what was she doing at this party? And why hadn't she told me about it? I took a step closer, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. She was holding a champagne flute, her posture relaxed and confident in a way I hadn't seen in months. The man standing beside her leaned in slightly, his hand brushing her arm as he spoke. I felt a pang of something. Jealousy? Confusion? Anger? Before I could confront her, the room fell silent. A voice rang out, commanding everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," the voice said, smooth and polished, "thank you all for coming tonight. We're about to begin the main event." The crowd parted, and a tall woman in a scarlet dress stepped forward, her presence commanding the room. She smiled, but there was something predatory in her expression. "Tonight," she continued, "we're here to celebrate the truth, to strip away the lies we tell ourselves and each other." Her eyes scanned the room, and for a moment, they locked onto mine. Because the truth always finds its way to the surface, doesn't it? A murmur ran through the crowd. I glanced back at Margot, but she was staring at the host with an expression I couldn't read. "Now," the woman said, raising a glass, "let's begin." The lights dimmed, and a large screen descended from the ceiling. My heart was pounding, and I didn't know why. I had no idea what was coming next, but something told me this wasn't just another party. This was personal. The air in the room felt heavy, like the moments before a storm breaks. I stayed rooted to my spot, my eyes darting between Margot and the large screen that now hung over the far end of the room. She hadn't noticed me yet. Her attention was fixed on the host, that tall woman in the scarlet dress who seemed to command the entire room without saying much. "Truth is a funny thing," the host began, her voice smooth and measured. "It has a way of lingering in the shadows, waiting for just the right moment to step into the light. And tonight, we shine that light." I wasn't the only one shifting uneasily. A murmur rippled through the crowd as the lights dimmed further, leaving the screen as the focal point of the room. The host raised a remote, and with a click, the screen blinked to life. At first, it showed nothing but static. Then, a grainy video started playing. I don't think I was breathing as I watched the screen. The video showed a dimly lit hotel room, the camera angled toward a bed. My stomach clenched, and I could feel my pulse thundering in my ears. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the dread clawing at me told me I already knew where this was going. And then she appeared. Margot. There was no mistaking her. My wife, walking into the frame. She wasn't alone. A man followed behind her, someone I didn't recognize at first. Tall, dark-haired, with an overly confident smirk plastered across his face. He placed his hand on the small of her back as they moved further into the room. "No," I whispered under my breath, though no one heard me. The video played on, the room deathly silent except for the muffled audio of Margot and this stranger laughing, talking, and then, God help me, kissing. I couldn't look away, even though every fiber of my being begged me to. The pain was visceral, like a punch to the gut. My chest tightened. My palms went clammy, and the world around me blurred. When the video ended, the room erupted. Gasps, whispers, and scattered laughter filled the air. Some people looked shocked. Others wore amused smirks, as if they'd been expecting this kind of scandal. But my eyes were only on Margot. She had gone pale, her mouth slightly open, frozen in place like a deer caught in headlights. Her champagne flute slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor, but she didn't seem to notice. The man standing beside her, the same man from the video, was shifting uncomfortably, trying to avoid eye contact with everyone. The host stepped forward again, her smile sharp and unrelenting. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is just the beginning of tonight's entertainment. I couldn't stay silent anymore. My hands were shaking, my fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. I pushed through the crowd, my vision tunneling as I moved toward her. Margot, I said, my voice low but steady. Her head snapped toward me, her expression morphing from shock to sheer panic in an instant. Clark, she breathed, her voice barely audible. What are you doing here? What am I doing here? I repeated, my tone sharper now. What are you doing here? Or better yet, what the hell was that? I gestured toward the screen, which had gone dark again but left its mark on everyone in the room. I can explain, she stammered, her voice trembling. Oh, I'm dying to hear this one, I shot back. Before she could answer, the host interrupted. Ah, Clark, I see you found your way to the party. You're just in time for the next act. I turned to face her, my frustration boiling over. Who are you? What the hell is all this? She tilted her head, her smile never wavering. Think of me as a facilitator, she said, her voice calm, almost soothing. A storyteller. Someone who believes the truth deserves to be shared, no matter how painful it may be. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice rising. Me? Oh, I don't want anything from you, Clark, but perhaps you want something from her. She gestured toward Margot. Answers, maybe? Or perhaps justice. The word hung in the air like a challenge. I turned back to Margot, whose eyes were welling with tears. Clark, please, let's go home and talk about this. I can explain everything, I promise. You can explain? I let out a bitter laugh. Are you kidding me? That video was pretty self-explanatory, don't you think? The crowd was still watching, their whispers like static in the background. I hated that we were putting on a public spectacle, but at that moment, I couldn't care less. You lied to me, I said, my voice breaking. You lied about work dinners, late nights, everything. How long? Margot, how long has this been going on? She didn't answer right away, and her silence spoke volumes. The host stepped forward again, clearly reveling in the drama. Shall we move on to the next part of the evening? I assure you, it only gets better from here. Stop, I snapped, glaring at her. You've done enough. But the host's smile only widened. Oh, Clark, you've barely scratched the surface. With another click of the remote, the screen lit up again. This time, it wasn't a video but a series of text messages. The sender and recipient names were visible, clear as day. Margot and the man from the video. The messages left nothing to interpretation. They were flirty, explicit, and worst of all, they made it clear this wasn't some one-time mistake. This had been going on for months, right under my nose. I felt a fresh wave of nausea as I read them, the room spinning around me. Margot was sobbing now, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. The host stepped beside me, lowering her voice so only I could hear. Painful, isn't it? But sometimes, the pain is necessary. Sometimes, it's the only way to see the truth for what it really is. Why? I whispered, not even sure who I was asking. Margot, the host myself? Why are you doing this? The host's smile faltered for the first time, and her eyes darkened. Because the truth has a way of catching up with all of us. And tonight, it caught up with her. I stared at her, unsure whether to feel grateful or furious. But one thing was certain, I wasn't leaving this party until I had answers. I stood there in the middle of the crowd, my legs threatening to give out beneath me. The room buzzed with energy, an unsettling mixture of shock, curiosity, and schadenfreude. It felt like I was the lead character in a tragedy, and everyone else was just here for the show. Margot's sobs pulled me back to the moment. She had stepped closer, her tear-streaked face a twisted portrait of guilt and desperation. Clark, please, she whispered, her voice trembling. Not here. Let's go somewhere private. I can explain everything. Private? I hissed, keeping my voice low, though my anger made it hard to control. Now you care about privacy? Because you didn't seem to care when you were sneaking around behind my back. Or when this, I gestured toward the screen, now mercifully blank, was plastered for everyone to see. The host's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Ladies and gentlemen, she said with the kind of theatrical flair that made my blood boil. We'll take a brief intermission while our special guests collect themselves. Enjoy a drink, mingle, and prepare for the second act. It's one you won't want to miss. The crowd began to disperse, some heading toward the bar, others murmuring among themselves, casting occasional glances my way. I wanted to punch something, or someone, but I had bigger things to deal with. I grabbed Margot by the arm, not roughly, but firmly enough to show her I wasn't playing games anymore. We're talking. Now. Clark, outside. Now. Her head dipped in shame, and she followed me without protest. We slipped out the front door into the chilly night air. The silence outside was deafening compared to the chaos inside, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, I turned to her. Start talking. What the hell is going on, Margot? She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering. Not from the cold, I suspected, but from the weight of what she knew was coming. I didn't mean for it to happen, she began, her voice barely audible. I laughed bitterly, the sound foreign even to me. You didn't mean for what to happen, Margot? The affair? The lies? Or for me to find out in the most humiliating way possible? It wasn't supposed to be like this, she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. I swear, Clark, I never wanted to hurt you. Things haven't been right between us for a long time. Things haven't been right? I repeated, my voice rising. And your solution to that was to cheat on me? To betray me? You didn't even give me a chance to fix things. She flinched at the harshness of my tone, but I couldn't stop. Who is he? I demanded. The guy from the video. Who is he, Margot? Her eyes dropped to the ground. His name is Brandon. He's a coworker. Of course. The infamous late nights at work. I felt like an idiot for not seeing it sooner. How long? I asked, my voice cold. She hesitated, and that moment of hesitation was like a dagger to my chest. 6 months, she finally admitted. I staggered back, the weight of her confession almost too much to bear. 6 months? You've been lying to me for half a year? It wasn't like that at first, she said quickly, her words tumbling over themselves. It started off innocent, just talking, venting about work. I didn't even realize it was becoming something more until it was too late. Too late? I repeated, my voice dripping with venom. Margot, you don't accidentally fall into a hotel bed with someone. You made choices. You chose to lie to me, to betray me. Don't stand here and act like you're some kind of victim. She started crying again, but this time, I didn't feel the urge to comfort her. The pain in my chest was too raw, too fresh. You should have told me, I said, my voice quieter now but no less angry. You owed me that much. If you were unhappy, if you were thinking about leaving, you should have said something. Instead, you destroyed everything we had. I didn't want to leave, she sobbed. I still don't. I love you, Clark. I know I messed up, but I swear, I never stopped loving you. Her words felt hollow, like they belonged to someone else. How could she say she loved me while doing this? Before I could respond, the front door opened, and the host stepped outside, her heels clicking against the stone walkway. Apologies for the interruption, she said, her tone light but her eyes sharp. I hate to rush, but we're ready to resume. Wouldn't want to keep our guests waiting. I glared at her. We're not going back in there. Oh, I think you'll want to see the rest, she said, her smile unnerving. After all, we're not done uncovering the truth. Margot looked at me, panic flashing in her tear-streaked face. Clark, don't. Let's just leave. Please. Her desperation only fueled my suspicion. What else was she hiding? No, I said firmly. I'm not leaving until I know everything. Margot opened her mouth to protest, but I was already heading back inside. When we returned to the room, the atmosphere had shifted. People were no longer mingling. They were seated in a semicircle, as though waiting for the next act in a play. The screen was lit up again, though this time it showed a simple countdown timer. Ah, perfect timing, the host said as we entered. She gestured for us to take 2 seats at the center of the semicircle. I hesitated, but curiosity and anger won out. I sat, and Margot reluctantly followed. The timer reached 0, and the screen changed again. This time, it wasn't a video or texts. It was a series of photos. Each one hit like a hammer. Margot and Brandon at a coffee shop, their heads close together. The two of them at a park, laughing at something I couldn't see. A photo of her kissing him in the parking lot outside her office. And then, a photo of Margot walking into our house. With Brandon. The room spun as the realization sank in. He'd been here. In our home. The one place that was supposed to be sacred, untouchable. Clark, Margot began, but I cut her off. Don't say a word. I couldn't even look at her anymore. My mind was racing, my heart pounding. I didn't know whether to scream, cry, or walk out the door and never look back. The host's voice cut through my haze. The truth hurts, doesn't it? She said, her tone almost sympathetic. But sometimes, it's the only way forward. I turned to her, my fists clenched. Why are you doing this? She tilted her head, studying me. Because someone wanted you to see the truth. Someone thought you deserved to know. Who? I demanded. Her smile returned, slow and deliberate. Oh, you'll find out soon enough. I was unraveling. Every part of me wanted to get up and walk out, but the need for answers rooted me to that seat. Around us, the crowd shifted in their chairs, eager for whatever spectacle the host had planned next. I could feel their eyes on me, judging, pitying, reveling in my misery. Margot sat beside me, her hands trembling in her lap. She wasn't crying anymore. Instead, she looked terrified. Not just ashamed, truly afraid. For a brief moment, I wondered if she knew something I didn't. The host's smile hadn't faltered since the beginning of the night, but now it seemed almost satisfied, like she'd been waiting for this exact moment. Now, she said, clasping her hands together. Let's dig a little deeper, shall we? Because the truth is rarely as simple as it seems. Before I could ask what she meant, the screen flickered again. This time, a new video began to play. It was a security camera feed, though I couldn't immediately place the location. The timestamp in the corner showed it was from 2 months ago. The footage was grainy, but clear enough to make out the scene. A man entered the frame, pacing nervously. My stomach churned as I recognized him. It was Brandon, the same smug co-worker from the earlier video. He was standing in what appeared to be a bar's private back room. A few seconds later, someone else entered the frame. It was Margot. I tensed, bracing myself for another blow. But instead of the flirtatious behavior I'd come to associate with her and Brandon, something was different. She looked tense, almost angry. The audio was faint, but the host increased the volume, making their conversation clear. What the hell were you thinking? Margot hissed, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Brandon shrugged, his cocky demeanor unshaken. Relax, Margot. Nobody's going to find out. That's not the point, she snapped. You have no idea what kind of risk I'm taking. Risk? He laughed. You're the one who wanted this, remember? Don't act like you're some innocent victim now. Margot's face twisted with frustration. This isn't just about us. If Clark finds out— Clark, Brandon interrupted, rolling his eyes. You worry too much about that guy. What's he going to do? Cry about it? He's harmless. My jaw clenched so tightly I thought my teeth might crack. Harmless? I wanted to reach through the screen and wipe that smug grin off his face. The video continued. You don't know him, Margot said, her voice quieter now. If she finds out, I froze. She? Don't worry, Brandon said, stepping closer to her. I've got it under control. Just stick to the plan, and everything will be fine. The video ended abruptly, leaving the room in a stunned silence. I turned to Margot, my voice low and icy. Who is she, Margot? Who were you so afraid would find out? Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She looked like a cornered animal, desperate to escape. The host's voice broke the silence. Oh, don't worry, Clark. I think we can shed some light on that question for you. The screen changed again, this time displaying a name. Delilah Reynolds. I blinked, the name stirring a vague familiarity, though I couldn't immediately place it. But the reaction in the room was immediate. Margot's face drained of what little color was left, her breathing quickening as panic overtook her. No, she whispered, shaking her head. You don't understand. Don't understand what? I snapped, my patience long gone. Who is Delilah, Margot? And what the hell does she have to do with this? The host raised her hand, silencing us both. Let's not keep Clark in suspense any longer, she said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. Delilah Reynolds Clark is the wife of our dear friend Brandon. My mind reeled. I hadn't even considered the possibility that Brandon was married, but that only made everything worse. It wasn't just my marriage that had been torn apart. It was someone else's too. The host continued, clearly enjoying herself. Now, Here's where it gets interesting. You see, Delilah is a resourceful woman, and when she started noticing that her husband was acting suspicious, she took matters into her own hands. What does that mean? I asked, my voice hoarse. It means, the host said, that she hired me. The room went still, her words sinking in like lead weights. Hired you to do what? I demanded. To expose the truth, of course, she said, gesturing grandly to the room. Delilah wanted Brandon's lies laid bare, and she wanted Margot's part in it exposed as well. So, she came to me. I stared at her, my mind struggling to keep up. You're doing this for her? Some stranger I've never even met? The host tilted her head, her smile taking on a more sinister edge. Oh, Clark, Delilah isn't the only one who wanted the truth to come out. I blinked, trying to process her words. What does that mean? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she motioned to the screen, and a new image appeared. It was a picture of me, sitting in my car, outside of my house. My blood ran cold. What is this? I stammered. That, the host said, is part of the story you don't know yet. Because while you were busy trusting your wife, other people were watching, waiting, and documenting everything. Margot's voice cut through, frantic and desperate. Clark, don't listen to her. She's twisting everything. But I couldn't focus on Margot anymore. My eyes were locked on the host, and the pit in my stomach was growing by the second. What are you saying? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The host's smile widened. I'm saying, Clark, that this didn't start with Margot and Brandon. It started much earlier. And if you're ready, I can show you the rest. I felt like I was drowning, the weight of everything crushing me. But I had to know. I had to understand how my entire life had unraveled in the span of one night. Show me, I said. The host nodded, her expression unreadable. As you wish. The screen flickered again, and I braced myself for whatever was coming next. The screen came to life, and for a moment, all I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. The grainy footage on the screen wasn't from a hotel or a bar this time. It wasn't even something unfamiliar. It was my house. The timestamp in the corner read 6 months ago. The camera angle was from the street, clearly taken from a car or a hidden camera across the road. The footage showed me stepping out of my front door, getting into my car, and driving off. What is this? I asked, my voice trembling. The host glanced at me, her expression unreadable for once. Patience, Clark. All will be revealed. The video cut to another angle, this time, looking through the windows of my home. I could see Margot moving through the living room, talking to someone just out of frame. A moment later, Brandon appeared. My fists clenched. Watching him in my house, standing in the very room where Margot and I had spent so many quiet evenings together, made my blood boil. But what happened next stopped me cold. Margot wasn't laughing with him. She wasn't flirting or acting like the woman from the earlier videos. No, this was different. She was pacing, her arms crossed, visibly agitated. The audio kicked in, and her voice filled the room. You shouldn't be here, she snapped. Brandon smirked, leaning casually against the armrest of the couch. Relax. Your little husband's at work, right? What's he gonna do? Magically show up? Margot glared at him. That's not the point, Brandon. You said you were going to keep your distance. This isn't part of the plan. Plan? I muttered under my breath, my mind spinning. The video continued. You think Delilah isn't watching me like a hawk? Margot hissed, lowering her voice. If she catches wind of this, of us, she'll blow everything up. And that's not just bad for me. That's bad for you. Brandon rolled his eyes. Delilah's all bark and no bite. You're giving her way too much credit. Margot stepped closer, her voice trembling. You don't know her like I do. She's not just going to sit back and let this go. She's already suspicious. I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't the Margot I knew. She was guarded, defensive, and, if I didn't know better, afraid. The video ended abruptly, leaving me staring at the blank screen. My throat felt dry, and my thoughts were racing. Margot, I said slowly, turning to her. What the hell is going on? What plan? Why were you so afraid of Delilah? Her lips quivered, but she said nothing. The host took a step closer, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. You see, Clark, the story you've been told, the one where your wife was just a lonely woman who got swept up in an affair, isn't the whole truth. The reality is much more complicated. What are you talking about? I demanded. She gestured to the screen, which lit up again. This time, it showed a series of documents, emails, to be specific. I squinted to read the names at the top, and my blood froze. They were between Margot and Delilah. What the? I trailed off, leaning forward as the email scrolled across the screen. The first one was dated almost a year ago. Subject, proposal Delilah. I've thought about what you said. You're right, this can't continue. But if we go through with this, I need assurances. Brandon can't know. Neither can Clark. If this backfires, I lose everything. Margot, another email appeared. This one from Delilah. Subject, your terms, Margot. I understand your concerns, but let me remind you. You came to me. You wanted out. You wanted to feel alive again. Don't back out now. We're in this together. Delilah, what the hell is this? I asked, my voice louder now, my anger bubbling over. Margot buried her face in her hands, her body trembling. Clark, I can explain. Then explain. I shouted, my patience gone. She took a deep, shuddering breath before finally looking up at me. Her eyes were swollen with tears, but there was something else in them now. Resignation. It wasn't supposed to go this far, she said. I never wanted to hurt you, Clark. I swear. Stop dodging the question. I snapped. What did you do, Margot? What did you and Delilah plan? Her voice cracked as she spoke. It started with Brandon. He wasn't always like this. He used to be kind, charming, but then things changed. He became controlling, manipulative. I knew Delilah was miserable in their marriage, but she refused to leave him. She thought she'd lose everything. Her house, her reputation, her friends. So you what? I asked, my voice rising. You decided to team up with her? To cheat on me with her husband? It wasn't like that, she cried. I didn't want Brandon. I never wanted him. Delilah and we made a deal. A deal? She nodded, her voice trembling. She wanted evidence. Proof that Brandon was unfaithful. Enough to destroy him in court, so she could finally get out. And I agreed to help her. My stomach turned. You helped her? By sleeping with him? No, she said quickly. At first, it was just supposed to look like I was involved with him. Enough to get him comfortable, to make him slip up. But then he started coming on to me, and I didn't stop him. I stared at her, the weight of her words crashing down on me. So you let it happen? You used me, used our marriage, as part of some twisted scheme? Tears streamed down her face. I didn't know what else to do. Delilah begged me. She said she'd take care of everything, that she'd make sure you never found out. But then Brandon started to catch on. He figured out that Delilah was behind it, and he threatened to expose us both. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My wife, my Margot, had lied to me, betrayed me, and dragged me into a web of deceit I didn't even know existed. And the party? I asked, my voice hollow. Is this part of your plan too? She shook her head. No, this wasn't me. This is all Delilah. As if on cue, the host, who I now realized was working for Delilah, stepped forward, her smile sharper than ever. You wanted the truth, Clark, she said. Now you have it. The lies, the schemes, the betrayal. It's all here. The question is, what are you going to do with it? I stared at her, my mind spinning. My life was in ruins, and I didn't know where to begin picking up the pieces. I felt like I was standing in the center of a tornado, debris swirling around me faster than I could process it. The lies, the schemes, the betrayal. It all crashed down at once. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to rage against everything that had been stolen from me, but I didn't. Instead, I stood there, staring at Margot like she was a stranger. Because in that moment, she was. Clark, please, Margot begged, her voice desperate. You have to understand, this wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't mean for it to go this far. You keep saying that, I said, my voice cold. But every time, it did go that far, didn't it? You made a choice, Margot, over and over again. You chose to betray me. She flinched like I'd slapped her, but I couldn't stop now. The anger, the hurt, it was all bubbling over, and I had no intention of holding it back anymore. You let this happen, I continued, my voice shaking. You let Brandon into our lives, into our house. You lied to me for months. And for what? To help some woman I don't even know? It wasn't just about her. Margot shouted suddenly, her voice cracking. I was scared, Clark. Scared of what my life had become. Scared of losing myself. I didn't know how to fix us, and when Delilah came to me, it felt like I finally had a way to do something, anything, to feel in control again. Control? I repeated bitterly. You call this control? You've blown up your life, Margot. You've destroyed our marriage. And for what? For some half-baked revenge plot? For what, Margot? She broke down then, sinking into her chair and burying her face in her hands. But I couldn't feel sympathy for her. Not anymore. The host, ever the opportunist, stepped forward with a smirk. As much as I'd love to let you two hash this out, Clark, I think it's time we wrapped up tonight's festivities. I turned to her, my anger now directed at this stranger who had pulled the strings from the shadows. Why are you even doing this? I demanded. Why drag all of this into the open like some twisted game? Her smile widened, and for the first time, I saw something darker behind her eyes. Because the truth matters, Clark. People like Margot and Brandon. They thrive in the shadows. They count on people like you being too trusting, too blind, to see what's happening right in front of you. But when you shine a light on them, they crumble. And you think humiliating us in front of a crowd is justice? I shot back. This isn't about the truth. This is about revenge. Her expression didn't waver. Maybe, but does it matter? You know the truth now, don't you? I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because as much as I hated her methods, she was right. I couldn't unsee what I'd seen tonight. I couldn't unlearn the truth about Margot and her betrayal. The host gestured to the crowd, who had been watching in stunned silence. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, her tone turning smooth and theatrical again, thank you for joining us tonight. I hope you've enjoyed this little dive into the depths of deceit. You're free to mingle, or, if you're so inclined, take what you've learned and reflect on your own lives. After all, the truth doesn't just expose, it teaches. The room began to stir as people got up, murmuring to each other in hushed tones. But I didn't move. My body felt like lead, my mind still spinning from everything I just learned. Margot reached out to me, her hand brushing my arm. Clark, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Please, let's go somewhere and talk. Just the two of us. I pulled my arm away, the anger rising in my chest again. Talk? I repeated, my voice bitter. About what, Margot? What's left to say? Everything, she pleaded. I'll tell you everything, no more lies. Just, don't walk away from me. Don't walk away from us. I stared at her, searching her face for some sign of the woman I thought I knew. But all I saw was a stranger who had taken everything we built together and torn it apart. I don't even know who you are anymore, I said finally, my voice breaking. Her face crumpled, but I didn't wait for her response. I turned and walked out of the room, out of the house, into the cold night air. The drive home was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles white, as I replayed the events of the night over and over again. Every word, every image, every lie. It all looped in my mind like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. When I pulled into the driveway, I didn't get out of the car right away. Instead, I sat there, staring at the house that now felt like a stranger's. I thought about all the moments I trusted Margot, all the times I defended her late nights and secretive behavior, thinking I was being a good husband. I was such a fool. Eventually, I forced myself to go inside. The house was dark and quiet, the only sound the faint hum of the refrigerator. I sat down on the couch, the same couch Brandon had been sitting on in that video, and buried my face in my hands. I don't know how long I sat there before my phone buzzed. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to deal with anything else tonight. But curiosity got the better of me. It was a text from an unknown number. You deserve better than her. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. Delilah. I stared at the message, my emotions a tangled mess of anger, confusion, and something else I couldn't quite name. Delilah had been pulling the strings from the start, orchestrating this entire night. But why was she reaching out to me now? Was this her way of apologizing? Of trying to make amends? Or was there something more? I didn't respond. Not yet. But as I sat there in the dark, clutching my phone like a lifeline, I realized one thing. The truth hadn't just destroyed my marriage. It had set something else in motion. And whatever it wasn't over yet. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? My mind was a battlefield, every thought a grenade threatening to detonate. By the time the first rays of sunlight streamed through the blinds, I was still sitting on the couch, staring at the text from Delilah. I hadn't responded, but her words looped in my head. You deserve better than her. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. Part of me wanted to delete the message and pretend it never happened. Delilah wasn't innocent in all of this. She had masterminded the night, hired that host, and orchestrated the chaos that had left me broken. But there was another part of me, a darker part, that couldn't help but wonder. Was she right? Did I deserve better? And more importantly, what else did she know? At 8:23 a.m., there was a knock at the door. My heart jumped. For a split second, I thought it might be Margot. She hadn't come home last night, not that I cared. But when I opened the door, it wasn't her. It was Delilah. She stood there on my porch, a tall, striking woman with sharp features and an air of quiet confidence. She wore a tailored black coat, her hands tucked into the pockets, and her expression was calm, too calm for someone who had just detonated multiple lives. "Clark," she said, her voice smooth and measured. "May I come in?" I hesitated. Every instinct told me to slam the door in her face, but curiosity won out. I stepped aside, letting her into the house that now felt more like a crime scene than a home. She glanced around, her gaze lingering on the couch where Brandon and Margot had once Saturday. "Quaint," she said, her tone neutral. "It suits you." I folded my arms, standing a few feet away from her. "What do you want?" She turned to face me, her expression unreadable. "I wanted to check on you. Last night was a lot." I let out a bitter laugh. "A lot? You're the one who orchestrated the whole thing. What did you expect?" Her lips quirked into a faint smile. "I expected exactly what happened. The truth came out, and everyone involved is now dealing with the consequences. That's the point, isn't it?" "And what about your consequences?" I shot back. "You think you're innocent in all this?" Delilah's smile faded. "I never claimed to be innocent, Clark, but I'm not the one who betrayed you. Your wife did that all on her own." Her words hit like a slap, and I hated how much they stung, because they were true. I hated that she was standing in my house, speaking calmly while my life lay in ruins. "Why are you really here?" I asked, my voice colder now. "If you're here to gloat, you can leave." She took a step closer, her voice softening. "I'm not here to gloat. I'm here because I know what you're feeling right now. Betrayed. Humiliated. Like the ground has been ripped out from under you. And I also know what comes next." "And what's that?" I asked bitterly. "Anger," she said simply. "Rage. The kind that eats away at you if you don't do something about it." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, I sighed, sinking onto the arm of the couch. "Why did you do it, Delilah? Why go through all this trouble to expose them like that?" Her jaw tightened, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something vulnerable in her eyes. "Because I was tired of being lied to. Tired of being treated like a fool. Brandon thought he could get away with anything because I'd always look the other way. I wanted him to see what it feels like to have the rug pulled out from under you." "And Margot?" I asked, my voice heavy. "She didn't deserve that public humiliation, no matter what she did." Delilah tilted her head, studying me. "Didn't she? She used you, Clark. Lied to you. Let Brandon into your home. She made her choices, just like Brandon did. Last night wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability. For both of them." I shook my head, exhausted by the weight of it all. "And now what? What do you want from me?" She hesitated for the briefest moment. "I want to help you," she said finally. "You deserve answers, closure. Whatever it is you need to move forward. And I can give you that." "How?" A small, knowing smile played at the corner of her lips. "By finishing what I started." Her words lingered long after she left. She hadn't stayed long, just enough to plant the idea in my mind, then disappear like a ghost. I couldn't decide if she was genuine or manipulative, if her offer to help was an olive branch or another move in her game. But part of me couldn't shake the feeling that she was right. There were still too many unanswered questions, too many loose threads. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Delilah. It was Margot. "Margot, I need to talk to you. Please, Clark. Just give me one chance to explain." I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to leave her twisting in the wind the way she'd left me. But another part, the part that still wanted answers, couldn't let it go. Against my better judgment, I replied, "Fine. Tonight. At the house. 8 p.m. Her response came almost immediately. "Thank you. I'll be there." When Margot arrived that evening, she looked like a shell of herself. Her eyes were swollen and red, her hair hastily pulled back. She stood in the doorway, clutching her purse like it was the only thing keeping her together. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. She hesitated, then walked in slowly, like she didn't belong here anymore. For a while, neither of us spoke. We stood in the living room, the tension between us so thick it was suffocating. Finally, I broke the silence. "You wanted to talk. So talk." She took a shaky breath, her hands twisting together. "Clark, I know I hurt you. I know I ruined everything we had, and I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I need you to know that I never stopped loving you. Even when everything spiraled out of control, you were always the person I thought about." I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my emotions in check. "You thought about me? While you were sneaking around behind my back? While you were lying to my face?" She winced but didn't look away. "Yes, and I know that doesn't make it better. But I didn't do this because I didn't love you. I did it because I was scared." "Scared of what?" "Scared of losing you. Scared of losing myself." Delilah came to me with a plan, and at the time, it felt like a way to take back control of my life. I didn't think about what it would cost. I didn't think about how much it would hurt you. "And I'm so sorry, Clark. I would give anything to take it all back." Her voice cracked, and tears streamed down her face. But I didn't move to comfort her. I couldn't. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you," I said finally, my voice raw. "But I need to know the truth, Margot. All of it. No more lies. No more half-truths. If there's anything else you're hiding, now's the time to say it." She hesitated, her eyes darting away. And in that moment, I knew there was more. "Tell me," I demanded. Her voice was barely a whisper when she spoke. "There's something else. About Brandon. And Delilah. What about them?" She looked at me, her face pale. It wasn't just about the affair. Delilah wasn't just trying to expose him. She was trying to destroy him. And she used me to do it. The room seemed to tilt, and I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. Destroy him how? Her next words hit me like a freight train. She wanted him to lose everything, Clark. His reputation, his money, his career. And she's not done yet. I stared at Margot, her words echoing in my head like a bell I couldn't unring. She wanted him to lose everything, and she's not done yet. "What do you mean she's not done?" I asked, my voice steady, though my chest felt like it was about to explode. Margot hesitated, her eyes darting to the floor. "Delilah didn't just want revenge, Clark. She wanted total annihilation. She didn't care who got caught in the crossfire. You, me, anyone. She used us to set Brandon up, to paint a picture that would destroy him in court, in business, in everything. And she made sure there was no way he could fight back." I leaned forward, the weight of her words pressing down on me. "No way to fight back? What does that mean? What did you do, Margot?" Her lip trembled, and she hugged her arms around herself, like she was trying to physically hold herself together. "Delilah convinced me to give her evidence." "Evidence of what?" Her voice cracked. Of the affair. Of his manipulation. Of him trying to force me into things. I froze. Force you? She quickly shook her head. He never did, Clark. But Delilah said that if I made it look like he did, no one would ever believe him. She said the courts would side with her, that his lawyers wouldn't be able to touch her. It was all part of her plan to make sure he lost everything. A chill ran down my spine. You're telling me you lied? That you accused him of things he didn't do? I didn't want to, she sobbed, tears streaming down her face. I told her it was too much, that it wasn't fair, but she wouldn't let it go. She said it was the only way to be free of him. And I was scared, Clark. Scared of what she'd do if I backed out. You were scared of her? I asked, my voice rising. You were supposed to be scared of me. Your husband. The person you were betraying every single day while you were plotting with her. She flinched, but I couldn't stop. The anger was bubbling over again, and I let it. You didn't just destroy us, Margot, I said, my voice shaking. You destroyed yourself. You let her manipulate you into becoming a pawn in her sick little game. And now you're standing here, asking me to understand? I'm not asking you to understand, she said, her voice raw. I'm asking you to see that I'm trying to fix it. I know I can't undo what I've done, but I don't want to keep lying to you. That's why I'm telling you everything now, because I'm scared of what she's going to do next. Her words gave me pause. For all her mistakes, and they were monumental. I could see the fear in her eyes, the genuine terror that Delilah still had control over the situation. What is she planning? I asked, my voice hard. Margot hesitated, then said, she's already leaked everything from last night. The videos, the texts, the photos. But that's just the beginning. She's working with someone. Someone with connections. She wants Brandon ruined, yes, but she's also targeting the people who helped him. His business partners, his allies. She's going after everyone. And if anyone tries to stop her, she trailed off, but I could already guess the rest. She'll destroy them too, I finished for her. Margot nodded. I stood there, processing her words, feeling like the ground was crumbling beneath my feet all over again. What had I gotten tangled up in? What kind of woman was Delilah that she could orchestrate something so cold, so calculated? I thought about the text she'd sent me. You deserve better. If you want to talk, I'm here. It had felt strange at the time, but now it made sense. She wasn't just reaching out to comfort me. She was pulling me into her web. Why are you telling me this now? I asked, my voice quieter. Margot looked at me, her eyes pleading. Because I don't want her to pull you in. I know you, Clark. I know you're hurting, and I know how tempting it would be to team up with her, to try to hurt me the way I hurt you. But she's not your ally. She'll use you just like she used me, and when she's done, she'll throw you away. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her that she had no right to warn me about anyone else's betrayal. But deep down, I knew she was right. Delilah wasn't doing this out of kindness. She wasn't my friend. What do I do? I asked, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. Margot's eyes widened slightly, like she hadn't expected me to ask. You cut her off, she said firmly. You don't respond to her texts, her calls, nothing. You walk away from this whole mess, and you start over. Without her. Without me. Her voice cracked on that last word, and I could see the pain in her eyes as she said it. But I wasn't ready to forgive her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. You're scared of her, I said, more a statement than a question. Yes, she admitted. I am. She is everything. Every text I sent, every video she recorded, even fake documents she created to back up the lies I told her. If I try to back out completely, she could ruin me. But if you stay out of it, maybe you'll be safe. Maybe. I repeated bitterly. That's not exactly reassuring. I don't have all the answers, Clark, she said, her voice breaking. But I know that the more you engage with her, the deeper she'll pull you in. Please, just promise me you won't let her manipulate you the way she manipulated me. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because despite everything, I still didn't know what I was going to do. After Margot left, the house felt even emptier than before. I sat on the couch, staring at my phone, Delilah's message still glowing on the screen. You deserve better than her. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. It was tempting. So tempting. But I couldn't shake Margot's words, the fear in her voice as she described what Delilah was capable of. I thought about everything Delilah had done so far. The party, the videos, the public humiliation. It was all so carefully orchestrated, so perfectly planned. She hadn't just wanted to expose Brandon and Margot. She wanted to destroy them, to burn their lives to the ground. And now, she wanted me to be part of it. But for what? The question haunted me. Was it just about revenge for her, or was there something deeper? Something she wasn't telling me? My phone buzzed again, breaking my train of thought. It was another text from Delilah. I know you're hurt, Clark. Let me help you. Call me. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to delete it and block her number. But another part, the part that was still searching for answers, was tempted to call. I had a choice to make. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at my phone. Delilah's words kept pulling at me, tugging at the raw, wounded parts of me that were still screaming for justice. Or maybe just revenge. Let me help you. That's what her message said. But what kind of help could she possibly offer? And what would it cost me? I thought about everything Margot had told me. Her fear wasn't exaggerated. I could see now how deeply Delilah had manipulated her, how easily she had turned Margot into a pawn in her plan to destroy Brandon. And yet, Margot had made her own choices. She had let herself be used, let herself betray me, betray us. Now Delilah wanted me to trust her. But could I? Maybe I was a fool, or maybe I was just too angry to think clearly. But in that moment, the need for answers outweighed the risks. I opened her message, stared at it for a moment longer, then hit call. She picked up on the second ring. Clark, Delilah said, her voice smooth and calm, like she had been expecting my call. I didn't bother with pleasantries. What do you want from me? There was a pause, then the faint sound of a smile in her voice. I don't want anything from you, Clark. I want something for you. And what's that supposed to mean? It means, she said, her tone sharp and deliberate, that I know how much you're hurting. I know what it feels like to be lied to, humiliated, treated like you're disposable. And I know that part of you is looking for a way to make them pay for what they did to you, to take back control. Her words hit harder than I wanted to admit. She was right. There was a part of me that wanted that. But I also knew she wasn't saying this out of the kindness of her heart. What's in it for you? I asked, my voice hard. Another pause, then a quiet chuckle. You're smart, Clark. I like that. What's in it for me? Closure. Justice. Call it whatever you want. But Brandon has been playing games for years. Manipulating people, hurting people, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. He deserves to face the consequences. And Margot? Well, she's just collateral damage. I clenched my jaw. She's still my wife. Is she? Delilah asked, her voice dripping with skepticism. After everything she's done, after all the lies she's told, can you really call her that? Or is she just someone you used to love? The words cut deep because they were too close to the truth. I didn't respond, and Delilah took my silence as an opportunity to press on. Look, she said, her tone softening slightly, I'm not asking you to make a decision right now. But if you want answers, real answers, I can give them to you. I can show you the whole picture, not just the pieces Margot has chosen to share. And why should I trust you? I asked, the anger bubbling back to the surface. You shouldn't, she said simply. But trust isn't the point. The point is that you deserve to know the truth. And I'm the only one who can give it to you. I agreed to meet her. Against my better judgment, against the warnings echoing in my mind, I agreed. Maybe it was pride. Or maybe it was the unbearable weight of not knowing. But I couldn't let this go. We met at a quiet cafe on the edge of town, far enough from prying eyes that I felt somewhat at ease. Delilah was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with a black coffee in front of her. She looked completely composed, like she wasn't the woman who had turned multiple lives upside down in a single night. Clark, she said warmly, gesturing for me to sit. I'm glad you came. I didn't respond as I slid into the seat across from her. Start talking, I said, skipping the small talk. She leaned back, studying me for a moment before speaking. Do you know what Brandon does for a living? Some kind of business executive, I said, shrugging. Margot said he was in corporate development. Delilah smiled faintly, shaking her head. That's what he tells people. What he really does is ruin people's lives. He's not just an executive, Clark. He's a fixer, a corporate assassin. He gets paid to tear down companies from the inside, manipulate people, and leave chaos in his wake. And he's very, very good at it. I frowned, trying to make sense of what she was saying. What does that have to do with me? It has everything to do with you, she said, her eyes narrowing. Because you're not the first husband he's targeted. I blinked, taken aback. What are you talking about? Delilah's expression hardened. Brandon doesn't just destroy companies. He destroys people. He finds women in vulnerable marriages, women who are bored, unhappy, or insecure, and he exploits them. He seduces them, uses them, then moves on. And when their husbands find out, he sits back and enjoys the fallout. My stomach turned. You're saying he planned this? That Margot was just another one of his victims? She wasn't innocent, Delilah said quickly. She made her choices, just like I did. But yes, Clark, Brandon targeted her. And he targeted you. The weight of her words sank in slowly, like poison spreading through my veins. I thought back to the texts, the videos, the way Brandon had acted so smug and confident. It all made sense now. How do you know all this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Because I've been watching him for years, Delilah said. I've been gathering evidence, building a case against him, not just for the divorce, but to make sure he can't hurt anyone else the way he's hurt me. And now, I'm giving you the chance to be part of that. Part of what? I asked, narrowing my eyes. Part of taking him down, she said simply. For good. I didn't respond right away. My mind was spinning, torn between disbelief and anger. If what Delilah was saying was true, then Brandon wasn't just some guy who had an affair with my wife. He was a predator. But that didn't make Delilah innocent. She had manipulated Margot, used her, and orchestrated the night that had destroyed my life. She was as much a part of this mess as Brandon was. Why me? I asked finally. Why do you care what happens to me? I care, she said carefully, because I see a man who deserves justice, and because I know what it's like to be lied to by the people you trust most. You and I aren't so different, Clark. Her words unsettled me, but I couldn't deny the pull of her offer. If there was even a chance to make Brandon pay for what he'd done, shouldn't I take it? Think about it, Delilah said, standing up and sliding a small card across the table. Call me when you're ready, but don't wait too long. Brandon's already starting to cover his tracks. I stared at the card, her name and number printed neatly in black ink. When I looked up, she was already walking out the door, leaving me alone with my thoughts. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced the house, running through every possible scenario in my mind. If I joined Delilah's plan, I might finally get closure. I might finally make Brandon pay. But at what cost? The thought of teaming up with her made my skin crawl, but the thought of doing nothing, of letting Brandon walk away unscathed, was worse. By the time the sun rose, I had made my decision. I picked up my phone and dialed Delilah's number. It's me, I said when she answered. Her voice was calm, almost smug. I take it you're ready to join me? I took a deep breath, knowing there was no turning back now. I'm in. When I agreed to join Delilah, I knew there was no coming back. Whatever this plan entailed, whatever she had in mind, I understood that I was stepping into something dark, something that would likely leave me just as scarred as I already felt. But I told myself it was worth it. It had to be. Brandon couldn't walk away from this. Not after what he'd done to Margot, to me, and to God knows how many others. The next morning, Delilah called me with instructions. Meet me at this address, she said, her voice brisk and all business. I'll explain everything when you get here. Bring anything you have, messages, emails, photos. The more evidence we can use, the better. I hung up without responding, staring at the address she had sent. It wasn't far, some office building downtown. It felt surreal to think that less than 48 hours ago, I was just a guy in a broken marriage trying to figure out what went wrong. Now I was standing on the precipice of something far bigger. I gathered what little I had, screenshots of Margot's texts, a few emails I'd found in the past day when I finally decided to dig into her computer, and the images from the party that had been burned into my brain. Then I left the house, not bothering to lock the door behind me. The office was cold, sterile, and impersonal. A single desk sat in the center of the room, covered in papers, files, and a laptop. Delilah was already there, waiting for me. Her hair pulled into a sleek ponytail and a look of quiet determination on her face. Right on time, she said, motioning for me to sit across from her. I didn't bother with small talk. What's the plan? She smiled faintly, pushing a thick folder toward me. This, she said, is everything I've gathered on Brandon over the years. His affairs, his shady business dealings, the companies he's dismantled, the people he's hurt. He thinks he's untouchable because he's careful, but he's not invincible. Not if we work together. I opened the folder, my stomach turning as I flipped through page after page of evidence. Photos of Brandon with other women, Margot among them. Financial records showing offshore accounts, transactions that couldn't be explained, and questionable dealings with people I didn't recognize. This is a lot, I said, my voice unsteady. It's enough to bury him, Delilah said, but it needs to be presented the right way. We're not just exposing him, we're dismantling him, piece by piece. His career, his reputation, his life, the same way he's done to so many others. And what's my part in this? I asked, narrowing my eyes. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine. Your part, Clark, is to be the face of this. You're not just a victim, you're a witness. You've seen firsthand what kind of person Brandon is. With your testimony and the evidence I've gathered, we can make sure he doesn't just lose his job or his reputation. We can make sure he loses everything. Her words hung in the air, heavy with promise. What happens to Margot? I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. Delilah tilted her head, studying me. That depends on her. If she stays quiet, if she doesn't try to interfere, she'll be fine. But if she gets in the way, well, let's just say she's already put herself in a very precarious position. I swallowed hard, the implications clear. You mean the false accusations you had her make? Her smile didn't waver. I mean the choices she made, Clark. I didn't force her to do anything. She knew what she was getting into. I wanted to argue, to push back, but I didn't. I wasn't here to defend Margot. Not anymore. Over the next week, Delilah and I worked together to finalize the plan. It felt strange, almost surreal, working so closely with her. She was calculating and efficient, always 2 steps ahead of everyone else. But there were moments, fleeting, subtle moments, where I saw glimpses of the pain she carried beneath the surface. This wasn't just revenge for her. It was personal. Why did you stay with him for so long? I asked her one night, as we sat in that cold office, combing through files. She didn't look at me. Because I was weak, she said simply. Because I convinced myself that things would get better, that he'd change. But people like Brandon don't change. They just find new ways to hurt you. I didn't press further. I understood that better than I wanted to admit. The day of reckoning arrived faster than I expected. Delilah had arranged everything, a press conference, timed leaks to major media outlets, and anonymous tips to Brandon's investors and board members. She left nothing to chance. I wasn't sure what to expect as I stood behind the podium that morning, staring out at the small crowd of reporters who had gathered in front of the building where Brandon worked. Delilah stood off to the side, her presence a steady anchor in the chaos. When I stepped up to the microphone, my hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. My name is Clark, I began, and I'm here to tell you the truth about Brandon Hall. The rest came tumbling out. His affairs, his manipulation, the lies he had told and the lives he had destroyed. I told them about the way he had targeted my wife, how he had wormed his way into my marriage and left it in ruins. I held nothing back, laying bare the devastation he had caused. By the time I finished, the reporters were shouting questions, their cameras flashing wildly, but I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Delilah had already made sure the rest of the story would reach them in due time. The fallout was swift and brutal. Within days, Brandon was removed from his position at the company. His wife, Delilah, filed for divorce, backed by mountains of evidence that ensured he wouldn't walk away with a penny more than he deserved. The media tore him apart, painting him as a villain who had finally gotten what he deserved. But it wasn't just Brandon who suffered. Margot reached out to me the night after the press conference. She was furious, accusing me of betraying her by teaming up with Delilah. How could you do this to me? She shouted over the phone. You think you're the only one who's hurting? You think this fixes anything? This isn't about fixing things, I said coldly. It's about justice. It's about making sure people like Brandon can't keep getting away with this. And what about me? She asked, her voice breaking. I didn't have an answer for her. In the end, Delilah got what she wanted. Brandon was ruined, and the people he had hurt finally had their closure. But for me, the victory felt hollow. My marriage was over, my trust shattered, and my future uncertain. Delilah called me a few days later. How are you holding up? She asked. I don't know, I admitted. She was quiet for a moment, then said, if you ever need anything, Clark, you know where to find me? I didn't respond. When I hung up the phone, I realized that for the first time in weeks, the anger was gone. The pain was still there, raw and unrelenting. But the rage that had consumed me was finally beginning to fade. I didn't know what came next. I didn't know if I could ever rebuild my life, or if I even wanted to. But as I sat in the quiet of my empty house, I knew one thing for certain. The truth, as painful as it was, had set me free.